Good evening, everyone.
Off the agenda, so I'm doing my part.
Good evening, everybody. We will start the meeting. This is the Grand Traverse County Resource Management Administration Committee meeting. Today is Wednesday, May 14th, 2014. It is 6 p.m., and we're located at the Commission Chambers on the second floor at 400 Boardman, Traverse City, Michigan. Our first order of business, if you have a cell phone, please put it on silent or vibrate. And we will call this meeting to order. We will stand for the pledge, and Commissioner Wheelock will lead us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. If we could have the clerk do the roll call attendance, please.
Commissioner Lathrop?
Here.
Max Bauer?
Here.
Lemkool?
Here.
Wheelock?
Yes, ma'am.
Thomas?
Yep.
Rennie?
Yes.
Enman?
Yes. Okay, we are all here. Next is the item for approval of the minutes for April 9th, 2014 of our RMA committee.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the April 9th RMA minutes as provided.
Moved by Commissioner Wheelock, seconded by Commissioner Lathrop to approve the minutes of April 9th, 2014 as presented. Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. All right, they stand approved. Next item is the first public comment, and if the clerk could read the guidelines, please.
Any person shall be permitted to address a meeting of the Board of Commissioners, which is required to be open to the public under the provision of the Michigan Open Meetings Act. Public comment shall be carried out in accordance with the following board rules and procedures. Any person wishing to address the board shall state his or her name and address. No person shall be allowed to speak more than once on the same matter, excluding time needed to answer commissioners' questions, if any. The chairperson shall control the amount of time each person shall be allowed to speak, which shall not exceed 3 minutes. The chairperson may, at his or her discretion, extend the amount of time any person is allowed to speak. Public comment will be solicited during the 2 public comment periods noted in Rule 5.4, Order of Business. However, public comment will generally be received at any time during the meeting regarding a specific topic currently under discussion by the board. Members of the public wishing to comment should raise their hand or pass a note to the clerk in order to be recognized, and shall not address the board until called upon by the chairperson.
Okay, those are the guidelines for public comment. Again, if there's something specific you're here for and you want to wait for that agenda item, we will certainly, if you get my attention or clerk's attention, we will call on you. Is there any public comment from the members here tonight? Seeing none, we will close public comment. We will move on to the approval of the agenda. But before we do that, I want to call in Commissioner Max Bauer. She has an item she wants to talk about on the agenda.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if you would please remove item number 10A. I am talking with Wendy Trout about that. She is doing some research, and we will be bringing that back at a later date.
Okay. Anybody else have any changes on the agenda? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the agenda as amended with the deletion of item 10A.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Wheelock, seconded by Commissioner Max Bauer to approve the agenda with the exception of 10A. All other items stand as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. We have an agenda. We will now move on to the consent calendar. If the clerk can read the consent calendar, please.
The purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one commission motion without discussion. Any member of the commission, staff, or the public may ask that any item on the consent calendar be removed and placed elsewhere on the agenda for full discussion. Such requests will be automatically respected. If any item is not removed from the consent calendar, the action noted, receive and file, or approval, is approved by a single committee action adopting the consent calendar. A, receive and file. Number 1, Road Commission Monthly Report. Number 2, Resource Recovery Managers Report. Number 3, Conservation District Monthly Report. B, approval. Number 1, 2014 hauler licenses. Number 2, paper and office supplies contract.
All right, you have heard the consent calendar as read by the clerk. Are there any items that the public wishes to pull from the consent calendar for further consideration? Seeing none, we will now move to the Board of Commissioners. Are there any commissioners that wish an item to be pulled? Commissioner Wheelock.
Can we pull the road commissioner
Okay.
report, just
All
because
right.
Jim's here and John's here, and I'm
All right.
sure that we have questions for him.
Sure. Anyone else? Okay, we need a motion to approve the consent calendar with the exception of A1.
So move.
Support.
All right, moved by Commissioner Wheelock, seconded by Commissioner Thomas to approve the consent calendar with the exception of A1. Roll call vote, please.
Max Bauer,
Yes.
Lemkool.
Yep.
Wheelock,
Yes, ma'am.
Thomas.
Yep.
Rennie,
Yes.
Lathrop,
Yes.
Inman.
Yes. Consent calendar is approved. We will now move on to special orders of business, and there are none scheduled for tonight. That goes to item number 8, items removed from the consent calendar. We have the item that was pulled by Commissioner Wheelock under receive and file, Road Commission monthly report. Commissioner Wheelock, you have the floor.
Yeah, I just, Jim, if you want to talk about it at all, for starters.
Jim Cook, Grand Traverse County Road Commission.
I guess the question that I had, and it wasn't so much on your report, but as long as you were here, I wanted to ask publicly. I've been getting a lot of inquiries about Crescent Shores Road, and I know that you're in negotiations with Long Lake Township about doing some improvements on that road. Do you have any idea where that's at?
Yes.
Yes.
We,
You don't want to talk about it.
yeah, we currently don't have a project on Crescent Shores Road. You know, we talked about it last year. It was a tough project for us to approve in light of our asset management plan. It doesn't really fit with the asset management plan, and not that we don't want to do it, it just comes down to, you know, having enough money. So, you know, since then, the township has purchased some additional property to create a parking lot, which is definitely going to help the situation, because one of the issues with Crescent Shores was there's 14 or 15 residents down the road. It gets a lot of use in the summertime from a lot of boaters, and there wasn't adequate parking, and so people tended to park on both sides of the road, which annoyed some of the residents out there, but it also created a safety concern. And so now that the township has acquired some additional property, they're going to construct a parking lot. For us, it becomes a more desirable project, just because we really can't build roads with parking on the sides. So if we can make it a no parking area, that just fits a lot better for us from a liability perspective. But again, it kind of comes down to money. So I know in 2015, right now, we have Cedar Run Road as one of the projects we'd like to do, and that's what it really, Crescent Shores competes with projects like that. So, do we spend our money on Crescent Shores Road, which is an important road, or do we spend it on, Cedar Run Road, where we get, a lot more traffic and it impacts a lot more people? So the answer is yes. I'm talking with the township. We're going to sit down and have a meeting and try to plan some kind of a partnership project. But right now we don't have a project plan there, and it's going to come down to how much money does everybody have to spend on it.
The problem with the bottom of Crescent Shores Road, and how do I back this back? Back a number of years ago, there was a tragic accident where a lady and 3 kids drove off the end of Crescent Shores Road and drowned. As a result of that accident, one of the things that was done was to take in the low part of that road and cut rumble strips into the road. They didn't put rumble strips up, they cut grooves in the asphalt. That asphalt is basically completely deteriorated in those areas. And the road is very rough and very dangerous. And, a big part of that is a result of the fact that they cut better than half of the asphalt out of there when they cut the rumble strips on it. You know, and the only thing I would ask is that you take a look at that and see if we could at least patch that area of some force. You know, I know that the road needs major re-engineering and reconstruction down in that wetland area. And I know that's probably out a little ways, but it is truly a dangerous situation in the bottom of that road right now. Where those rumble strips were cut across the road, it is absolutely a hazard.
Yeah, we'll talk
So
to the township about that.
We
because
need
if
to at
it's-
least take a look at that and see, because, you know, I believe, you know, and I personally wasn't very in favor of the idea of cutting the asphalt and making rumble strips in it in the first place. But it was what was done, and, you know, it's now been probably close to 10 years. And the asphalt has completely deteriorated in that area, and it is truly a hazard at this point. So I would just ask that you take a look at it.
Okay, yeah, we'll talk to the township, and again, you know, there's some other options that we could use instead of,
It's just, you know, it's just down there in that area where they cut the asphalt grooves, the grooves in the asphalt is just
Okay.
completely deteriorated.
I have Commissioner Maxbauer and then Commissioner Lathrop.
I just wanted to add to Commissioner Wheelock's speaking about Crescent Shores Road. My sister hates it when I tell this story, but I tell it every so often. My Uncle John and Aunt Marge Maxbauer had a cottage down there, and she had her driver's permit. She was 15. And she took a wrong turn and drove into the lake. My mother was seated next to her in my mother's lovely brand-new Chrysler New Yorker. And I was in the back with my little sister, and my mother immediately hit the power windows. My mother was a swimmer, and we swam out the windows.
Wow.
And my father was behind us in a station wagon, stopped in just with this horrified, I still remember the horrified look on his face. But we all got out of the car. And, you know, this was a long time ago. But at night, you know, it looked like there was a road there. Would you go out there and at least take a look at it and make sure that there's some kind of, I don't know, paint, something?
They've done a
that-
much better job of signage and into the road signage and stuff that wasn't there previously.
Okay, that's always concerned me. I mean, it's still, I still remember it.
yeah, we'll be meeting with the township to talk about that, about their parking lot and about Crescent Shores Road. I mean, there are things that you would typically do. I mean, you would provide islands and vegetation and things that sort of prevent people from driving straight off. That's a tough one because it wasn't a planned park. I think it's just evolved, and so it's at the end of a road, which is kind of tough to fix after the fact. But again, we'll talk to them
There was about a
about it.
2.5 year period where they actually put an 8-foot barricade in the center of that turnaround, which was a real disaster.
Okay,
For the plows
Commissioner
and for everybody else.
Lathrop.
This is not as serious as what you guys are talking about, but I was at the Peninsula Township meeting last night, and I had some citizens asking about county roads and bad potholes. And does that come under the auspices of a project, or do you fill in potholes out there?
Yeah, we actually, I hate to admit it, but we actually budget $300,000 a year to fill potholes. And so, this year isn't nearly as bad as last year because we had this long, steady, I think we're still on the long, steady warm-up, but so we haven't seen that horrible, frost thaw cycle, and so we have people out. We actually run 3 patch wagons full-time. The guys are out running 2 Durapatchers now, and
Okay.
up until just last week when the asphalt plants reopened, we were using cold patch material, and so this is very late in the year for us to start doing that. We would normally be using hot mix sometime in March, and here we are in May. We're just starting to use it, but the hot mix is a much more permanent fix than. I mean, it's not perfect. It'll leave a bump or a divot, but that cold patch that we use in the winter months and in the early spring is it gets blown out. You put it in, and we'll go out and fill the same hole, 3 to 6 times in the spring, so,
So these potholes may yet be filled then?
yeah, these guys are working, I mean,
Okay, thank you.
40 hours a week doing it.
Commissioner Lemko.
I might also make recommendations, you go onto their Facebook page and tell them where the pothole, and they will respond. And so that's the easiest way, because they can't get around to everything. So if any of your constituents, just go onto Facebook, County Road Commission, type in where the pothole is, and she will respond saying, yeah, we'll put it on the schedule, and they get it on the schedule. The next 2 days, it's almost done.
Thank you, Herb. I didn't know
So
that.
I just wanted to say thanks for that.
Yeah,
Sure, Tom.
thank you. Yeah, just to add to that, when people do that, or if they call in, and that's if people can call in, we just need to know, but what happens is a service request is generated. So we actually know, a location of every pothole that's reported, and so it goes on a list, but more importantly, when they generate a service request, it triggers some things. I get a report, our superintendent gets a report, we all get these reports, and we get them weekly, and our goal is really to address, these things, and, I think our policy is, within 7 to 10 days, but really, internally, we try to get to them within 1 to 3 days, so.
Cool, thank you.
Commissioner Thomas.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind touching a little bit on Lafreniere Road. After listening to all the complaints this afternoon at your meeting about how bad Lafreniere is, all I could think of as I was sitting there was that, and I didn't dare say it under public comment, but I can come up real quick with 12 roads or 14 that are a lot worse than Lafreniere. So there seems to be a lot of questions around right now. What are we going to do with Lafreniere? And
Yeah, there was an article in the paper, and somehow, I guess we had a special meeting today. It was one of our last meetings in our efforts to balance our budget, which we do every April. And this was a little tougher year for our staff and our board to balance that budget, but we got within about $43,000 of a zero balance. So, but unfortunately, one of the discussions was, what are we going to do with Lafreniere? We don't have enough money to do from the intersection to Hammond. Our plan all along was to do from the Hill to Hammond, and we've been talking with the county administrator and Garfield Township about a partnership project, and we've been talking about it for a couple of years. And this year, we really hoped that we would at least tackle that portion of the project, but nobody's really in a position to do that. And then we've discovered some things. I mean, a center turn lane makes a lot more sense in front of the county buildings, and really kind of from that stretch where all the residences are through the county property, a turning lane versus a passing flare. We've created an unsafe condition out there that we just don't want to keep there. So the project keeps evolving, keeps getting bigger, and so we met here a week or two ago, and we discussed, hey, let's put the project on hold, and let's do the entire project, and let's give Lansing a little bit more time to come up with they're working through right now that Roads at Risk Reserve Fund, and again we have high hopes that we're going to potentially get about $1.5 million, and we think we have a $2 million project there. So a couple of weeks ago we talked about doing if the county can't afford to do anything this year, maybe the township and the road commission could do a smaller project on Lafreniere Road, which would be maybe from the county property to Hammond. But the more we talked about it, the more absurd it kind of looked, because we'd be spending money and repairing the best section of the road, which just leads to further complaining and concerns about what's wrong with these guys. They're not fixing the bad part of the road. So my recommendation to the board was, why don't we just hold off until 2015 to do anything on Lafreniere unless we receive this Roads at Risk Reserve Fund. And again, we're going to be somewhat, controlled by the construction season. If they came to us now or within the next even month, we potentially could still do a project from the Hill to Hammond, because we've actually done the survey work and the design work is probably 98% complete. So we're ready to roll if we have the money, but honestly, there's no way we could do from the hill to the intersection this year. There's just too many other things that have to happen. We have to relocate utilities. There potentially could be some easement acquisitions. We're definitely going to be doing work outside of the right-of-way because we're cutting that hill down. So it sort of became a big issue at our meeting today during the public hearing portion, and it really boils down to the funding issue that we just have across the state. There isn't enough money to fund our roads, and we're sort of in a bad position across the state, and so we had some concerned citizens that they're fed up. They don't care what the problem is. They want it fixed. They want it fixed now, and we're just not going to get there. So again, the intent is we're going to we're moving forward with the project. We've got it almost completely designed, and we're going to do something, and if not this year, in 2015.
Okay, any other questions on the road commission report? Commissioner Rennie.
Jim, on our road millage projects, we're going to do about 40 miles. Originally, we had talked about another 32 miles over and above that 40. What's the status of that?
That's correct. We just started construction last week on the first 40 miles, which is funded. $3.5 million of the $4 million that we're spending came from the millage funds. $500,000 is coming out of our MTF. While we've been balancing our budget, our hopes were to do 32 miles of chip seal projects, and in our balancing of our budget, we had to decide: are we going to use fund balance to do every project that we have on the books this year, or are we not going to use fund balance? And so our board decided that we're not going to use fund balance, and so we're about $43,000 into fund balance, but basically we've cut the projects, the chip seal projects, down to 10 miles. So we've got 40 miles of what I'll call millage funded projects. We have 10 miles of general fund chip seal projects. And then we have about another between 5 and 10 miles of some partnership projects with some of the townships, as well as we have a few projects that are state and federally funded, which is South Long Lake and South Airport Road. So the bad news is we aren't going to get 80 miles this year, but we are going to get 60. And again, that's more than's been done as far as anybody can remember, and probably in the history of the Road Commission at this point. So I think we're going to have a good year.
Pretty cool.
All right, any other questions?
I had one
Yes.
other question on these houses on Hartman. You're going to tear these homes down, but you're going to keep the property? You say dispose, so you just mean the dwellings themselves?
Yeah, we acquired those properties back in the early 2000s, and they acquired them. I'm not exactly sure why, other than they were acquiring them for additional right-of-way. So there was some opportunity, for whatever reason, these houses came up for sale, and the Road Commission bought them. And we purchased them through Build America funds, and this was kind of that stimulus program that they had back then. And so because we use those funds, we can do anything we want with the property. So we can tear down the buildings, and we actually rented one of them out for all these years. And then, but two of them aren't in any kind of a condition that we could rent them out. So they've been vacant, and we've had some issues and some concerns with, homeless people, deciding to use them, and it's really come down to a safety concern. The structures are unsafe, and so we're actually going to. One of them is going to be torn down. We have one resident in Grand Traverse County who grew up in one of the houses and would like to purchase the house and move it. So that's a great deal for us. And then the other house that's currently rented, it's kind of fallen into some pretty tough condition. So we are asking those people to terminate their lease, and we'll be tearing that house down as well. We can't dispose of the property because then we'd have to pay the money back.
You're going to do something with the property.
So right now we're just going to hold on to it until we decide what we're really going to do with it.
All right, any other questions?
That makes it non-taxable property?
Right now.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, it's
It already-
non-taxable.
Yeah, it already is, probably.
I have a
Well, no, it's
question
not
for-
if they're running it.
Jim, you could sell the property and then pay the money back from the sale of the property, could you not?
We could. Yeah, we just, at this point, we haven't decided what we're going to
Okay.
do with it, just,
I was just curious.
but we do want to make it safe, so we're
Oh,
going
yeah.
to tear the buildings down and kind of restore the property to
Can we
make
put
it.
a jail there?
It's kind of small.
All right. Any other questions?
Moving
Mr.
on.
Chairman, I would move to approve the road commissioner report. Thank you. Thank you, Jim.
We have a motion by Commissioner Wheelock to approve the reports under
Absolutely.
under receive and file, A1. Is there a second?
Yes.
Second by Commissioner Rennie. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, passes. Thank you.
Thank you, and I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware that we just started up the Adopt a Highway program again this year. And so you may see, if you don't see it, you'll see it through the townships, but Renee is desperately looking for volunteers to take over some cleanup of some roads, so just an FYI, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We will now move on to department action items, which are none. We will move to item 10, unfinished business. Item A has been pulled from the consent calendar and will be brought back at a later date. So we will go to 10B, which is stormwater agreements, page 21. And Dave, I guess Commissioner Lathrop wants to
I'll recuse myself.
himself. Sit in the audience, will show the record. If the clerk could record that Commissioner Lathrop has recused himself and will be sitting in the audience during this discussion. And so refer to page 21, and Dave, do you want to take the lead on this one?
Sure.
All right.
The board asked for this information to be given to them at this meeting. What you've got in your packet is the signed agreements, the agreement that we had with, actually, it's the resolution that you adopted that appointed the drain commissioner or allowed the drain commissioner to do this work for the village of Fife Lake and Fife Lake Township to administer their stormwater ordinances. There's a copy of the intergovernmental agreement that was signed with both jurisdictions.
Okay.
And a copy of their individual stormwater ordinances. And there's some other information.
I understand this was brought forward for clarification purposes, just to remind commissioners how we ended up approving this and that
Right.
and that the
there
drain
was some
commissioner
There was
was
some
allowed
question
to-
about whether this intergovernmental agreement was in fact between the governments and appointed
Yes.
or involved the drain commissioner or whether the drain commissioner, Kevin McEllier, was actually independently contracting with the local units, and that is not the case.
Okay. And those agreements are pretty clear. And that's why the prosecutor has agreed to enforce those
Right.
issues, and Fife Lake Village has agreed to pay those expenses.
Right.
Okay. So this is, I think, a clarification item that we just wanted to bring back to the board members. Any discussion on this before we move on? All right, we'll move on to soil erosion and sediment ordinance status.
This is kind of related, that came out of also the same discussion. The soil erosion and sedimentation ordinance that we have also includes stormwater, and we're going to have to take action, we're going to have to amend our ordinance eventually to remove the stormwater pieces of this, if that's in fact what the board wants to do. I don't know if Bob wants to talk about this or not.
Yeah, if I could comment on that. You know, I did go through and I tried marking up our current ordinance, and what you have to understand is that when this document was created, stormwater and soil erosion and sedimentation were very interrelated in the document. It's not real simple to separate the two. For example, there are also design guidelines, a very thick set of design guidelines, engineering guidelines for how you measure retention basins and all kinds of things like that. And, you know, one of the things that's not clear to me is whether or not those design guidelines apply only to stormwater or whether they apply to both. I'm not sure that the folks in our construction code department who do soil erosion and sedimentation control, whether they are able to make those determinations themselves. The ordinance was, it's my understanding, it was drafted by an environmental engineering firm, or at least with their input, and borrowed from other jurisdictions. And so this would be my suggestion. I think there's some obvious fixes that could be done to make it less confusing that this is a soil erosion and sedimentation control ordinance and it doesn't cover stormwater. And, you know, I can make those fixes, but I think that, and I would want to consult with, at least talk to the soil erosion folks with the county before submitting a draft, and I think we could do that fairly quickly. But what I would suggest is that we probably need to sit down with someone with more expertise and come up with a final ordinance that completely separates the stormwater and soil erosion and sedimentation portions of the ordinance. I'm just not sure that we have the expertise within the county to do that.
Interesting.
Commissioner Lathrop.
Yeah, this is a really bigger problem to commercial, as it exists now, commercial people applying for permits, because in this soil erosion ordinance, whether they're within 500 feet of the water or not, they have to get a soil erosion permit costing about $300, even though they might be just putting in a postage stamp size deck. This was originally designed as a stormwater provision. So what we have here is the Soil Erosion Department currently enforcing stormwater provisions under the guise of soil erosion, and it's a great expense to our developers and our commercial people. Secondly, I'd like to say that when we finally do fix this thing, we ought to have great transparency and have a public hearing on it, because stormwater is much more important than people realize, and it needs to be handled correctly as soil erosion. So I think we need to have, when we do a fix, we need to have a public hearing and have transparency.
Okay, Commissioner Thomas.
Aren't we confusing the two here? Sedimentation and soil erosion is for anything within 500 feet of a lake or stream or an excavation of a certain size. Where the stormwater ordinance generally only applies to commercial and industrial, and it's strictly for stormwater, which is altogether different. Because you got to have that anywhere you go.
Well, you know, I did get a markup from the Soil Erosion Department originally that they'd simply just gone through and crossed out the word stormwater. Well, it's not that simple, because stormwater is related to soil erosion and sedimentation, and I don't feel it's my position to make judgment calls about whether that was the intent of the board or not. And that's why I think more expertise is required to do that. This is my suggestion, and it's not new. I've talked to several commissioners and the drain commissioner long ago and other folks about the idea of forming a committee with folks like Mr. Nelson and maybe someone who represents a developer, commissioners, to look at the soil erosion ordinance now that it's, almost 25 years old, I believe. Our soil erosion ordinance incorporates all of what is required by state law, but it goes further than that, and it's much more restrictive than state law.
Correct.
And I think when you're trying to separate out the stormwater portions of the ordinance, you know, that I would say this was more the stormwater portion of the ordinance driving the ordinance. Not, it wasn't, it's really the tail wagging the dog, so to speak. And that would be my suggestion, is to get all of the stakeholders involved in a committee that would look at the ordinance and determine, what should the soil erosion ordinance look like?
Yeah, I have a comment.
How is it working?
If I have a comment, and then I'll get to Commissioner Lemko. One of the main phone calls that I have gotten as a county commissioner for my district is that farmers and businesses that do excavation work, or, they get involved in moving dirt and those kinds of things, like farmers and those kinds of things on an ongoing basis. They have property that is in Grand Traverse County, and also adjacent to that is land located in Antrim County, for example. And so when they are doing a project that involves both parcels, one located in Antrim, one in Grand Traverse, what they're telling me is that, and this is true, I think, in Leelanau County as well, is that the surrounding counties have a less restrictive ordinance regarding these two particular issues. So they comply with the ordinance with regard to, for example, Antrim County's requirements, but when they make application to Grand Traverse, there's a whole set of higher criteria guidelines that they have to go through, and then they just appear frustrated with all the extra steps and the more restrictive language and those kinds of things. So I don't know, Bob, how you feel about if we form a committee, which I think is a good idea. I think we need to find someone with some strong expertise in both areas, maybe from the legal field as well, that you can maybe rely on, as well as the local input. But I'm just wondering, for those property owners that are dealing with adjacent counties, if we can look at what they have in terms of their ordinances and see if we can, if that would matter in terms of the language that we would want to look at. What would be your
Well,
thought
I
on
think
that?
the most important thing is to have folks from this county who, we've got plenty of organizations that represent environmental interests,
True.
like the Watershed Center, and I'm sure you could find a developer or two that might want to, have some input. I think it's a very local decision, and that's why my suggestion would be some sort of a committee. I feel very comfortable with the legal portion of it. You just need to tell us what you want, and we can write that down. But I think trying to separate the stormwater from the soil erosion and sedimentation portion of this ordinance, that calls for more than just me as an attorney, because there were judgment calls made back when the ordinance was passed. There was a lot of public input.
Right.
Maureen Templeton would be a good person to be involved in the discussion, because she was instrumental in spearheading that whole ordinance. So
Interesting.
that's
Okay.
that's my suggestion.
Okay, Commissioner Lemko.
Yeah, when this thing first come up, I had made a proposal to some of the townships that we ought to get together and sit down with the townships and talk about this, because this is an issue for them too. And I got mixed results. I mean, I got no way, I don't even want to touch it, to, yeah, we'd be glad to sit down and talk to you about it. So I'm not sure, what the first step should be, because I think, if we don't involve the townships, then they get the idea that we're stepping all over what they think their responsibilities too. And so we need to figure out how we go through this process. Do we start with the townships? Do we start with the experts? Do we start with the legal part of it? I think we need to vet out this whole process thing before we start changing our ordinance.
All right, we got Commissioner Wheelock, Lathrop, and then Max Bauer.
Well, I don't think there's any question. Grand Traverse County Soil Erosion Sedimentation Ordinance combined with the stormwater ordinance, and they were absolutely intermingled when they were done, was the most restrictive water control ordinance in the state of Michigan. Hands down, it absolutely was. And that was discussed pretty thoroughly at the time it was passed the first go-around. And it wasn't a unanimous decision by our community that that's what they wanted to do. But along the way, the county had determined that we're going to deal with soil erosion and sedimentation, and I believe it was Mr. Snyder's opinion, the previous prosecutor, that the stormwater sedimentation part, or the stormwater part, had to be a local ordinance.
Yes.
It had to be by the townships, not a county-wide ordinance. You know, over the years, we've seen junk ordinance countywide go away, we've seen noise ordinance countywide go away, and a number of other things, that these were the responsibilities of the local units, not the county saying you will comply with these. So along the process of doing that, a year and a half ago or so, we made the determination that Grand Traverse County was not going to be involved in stormwater. And we gave it back to the townships. And about at least half of the townships that I know of have decided they did not want to take the county's draft stormwater ordinance and adopt it. Some of them have come up with things of their own. Some of them have just decided stormwater wasn't something they were going to regulate as part of their zoning ordinance, because that's where it would fall to. If it goes back to the townships, it goes under the planning department in their zoning ordinance. And the townships elected not to do that. And thereby, we decided that we weren't going to get involved. I think you're right, Bob. The only way to fix this is to almost start over. You know, I'm not saying that we won't be using some of the ordinance that we have, but those two items, stormwater and soil erosion, are so intermingled in our current ordinance, there's no possible way to go through and redact particular parts of it. It's just not going to work. You know, so I guess, you know, I certainly support your idea of, you know, appointing a committee to review this and get some outside help, because the 7 of us sitting here don't have the expertise to do that.
All right, we have Commissioner Lathrop, Max Bauer, and then Thomas.
I wasn't going to bring this up until report, when we do our reports about our townships and stuff, but I was at Peninsula Township last night, and I would say half the meeting was over stormwater. And they had a young woman who's building a single house on a single lot, and her contractor were there. And formally, the stormwater and soil erosion permits and engineering, all that would cost somewhere between $150 to $200. Because of the breakup of what happened a couple years ago, and the county not handling anymore, her cost was $3,500. The basic cost for a person just getting a stormwater permit at Old Mission Peninsula is $850. So this is happening all over the townships, because professional engineers are now handling this, where county staff used to handle it. And our citizens are paying a lot more money than they should have to. So just FYI.
Okay, Commissioner Max Bauer.
I support Prosecutor Cooney's recommendation of a committee, and I would agree that with Commissioner Wheelock, mark your calendars, that the 7 of us do not have the expertise to do this. I'm thinking maybe, obviously, someone from the Watershed Center, perhaps someone from Chris Bisdock's environmental firm, but we absolutely have to do something, because what we have isn't working, and I'm going to give you a specific example. I used to live in Peninsula Township, and I was forced, at the time I did some remodeling, I was forced to do a drainage. I lived at the bottom of Timber Lane on East Bay, and I was forced to do a drainage thing in my yard so that water could come down Huron Hills and go into East Bay. I sold the house. Along comes the new owners, and they filled in the lot. I mean, they filled it in. Now, my former next-door neighbor, her house is getting flooded because they've diverted the water. Soil erosion must have allowed them to fill it in, because and I can show you, I can dig down and show you exactly where it's supposed to be. I can show you. But they allowed it to be filled in, and now my next-door neighbor, my former next-door neighbor, she spent thousands of dollars trying to stop the water from coming into her house. We've got a problem here, and it needs to be addressed in some way, shape, or form.
Okay, Commissioner Thomas.
Well, first of all, this is different from what I was going to say. The builders I've talked to in the last, since we made the change, the builders are all happy. But other than that, the only thing I want to tell you is that the 4 townships that I represent, none of them want to fool around with the stormwater ordinance. They've all expressed displeasure.
Just one question and get to Commissioner Lundquist. In terms of the possibility of moving forward with a community ad hoc committee to bring back a recommendation to the board and work with the language. Dave, have any experience in that in any of the other counties that you've been administrator, and can maybe suggest a process that we could use to go forward with this? Maybe have you and Bob or someone from his staff maybe just cite various areas in the community that you would like to recommend that they possibly join this committee and give us a suggestion on how to go forward with this change?
In Midland, the drain commissioner was responsible for these functions for soil erosion, and we did a soil erosion rewrite. It was a process. There was a lot of public involvement, and there was draft ordinance, and then they commented on it, and then it was rewritten, and another public comment period, and until we got it right. In Clinton County, we contracted all that out. The drain commissioner did it, but it was all contracted work. So, and we didn't, as I recall, we didn't rewrite the soil erosion ordinance. But at any rate, it is a process. The one we went through in Midland, the drain commissioner pretty much was in charge of it. In this case, I would think that our construction codes division would be organizing all that, getting the builders together, getting property owners together to comment on, follow the process of adopting an ordinance. And he will need some, technical and professional help to, put it all together and figure out what's right and what's wrong with the current ordinance, and what's working and what doesn't. So it can be done.
Okay, Commissioner Lundquist.
Takes time.
You're on the same wavelength as I was, is
Okay.
that, my recommendation is to give it to Dave and for him to come back and make a recommendation as to the process and what we should be doing and what we should be looking at, and so that we can kind of look at that as if that's what we want to do in a chronological order and how we want to be able to handle that.
Okay.
I think Dave would be the one to do it, and if he needs to bring in expertise or something, then he should be allowed to request that, and we can work forward. And working with Mr. Cooney and anybody else that he feels that is necessary for him to bring in, and if any of our commissioners have any other suggestions, get with him.
Commissioner Maxwell.
Well, I was going to just suggest, I think Mr. Cooney's recommendation of asking Maureen Templeton to come on board is an excellent one. Watershed Center is an excellent recommendation. Perhaps Mr. Bisdox is extremely community-minded and spirited, and he may have someone in his firm that's willing to come on board and take a look.
Well, Jim Olson is right up there.
At least we can ask,
Yeah.
and I do think if any of us have recommendations, we should pass them on to the administrator.
All right, do we have a motion on the floor? Herb?
I'll make the motion that we present, have the administrator review and make a recommendation back to the commissioner as to what he feels the process should be.
Second.
Okay. Moved by Commissioner Lundquist, seconded by Commissioner Runny, to ask the county administrator to come back with a process, how we would approach separating these two ordinances, and suggest maybe some memberships on the committee. Is there discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Does Mr. Lathrop need to recuse himself on this?
That's his decision, and he's participated in the discussion, so I assume that
You feel
he's
comfortable
not-
voting on this?
Yeah, because it's separate from
Yeah.
the drain
Okay.
commissioner.
I don't
It doesn't involve him at all.
Yeah,
Okay.
Okay, are you guys, is that okay with you guys?
yeah, it's separate.
I will if you want me to.
No, it's separate.
All right, okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Passes. All right, great suggestion. Moving on to item D, Commissioner Max Bart, you had a question on the
I
per diem
did,
policy that we
and
passed?
we passed April 30th. We
Yes.
passed a motion saying that our per diems would be submitted on a monthly basis. Shortly after that, one of the committees I sit on sent out a letter to all of our board members saying, and you have 6 months in which to submit your per diem, which we only changed it for ourselves, and which is fine. But I just wanted to make sure that we are all on the same page here. Are we going to permit the rest of our boards and commissions to sit on per diems for 6 months? Or do we want
Shouldn't.
to request that they too submit per diems on a monthly basis?
All right, good question.
That's my question.
Very good question. Commissioner Wheelock.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we notify all committees that collect per diems that their per diems must be submitted within 30 days.
Support.
All right, moved by Commissioner Wheelock, seconded by Commissioner Thomas, to notify all the boards and commissions within Grand Traverse County that if they receive a per diem, they should submit it within 30 days. Discussion. Commissioner Lemkool?
Yeah, I guess my concern is that, when do you want this to start? And also, if they don't submit it, are they waiving their right to be able to collect a per diem?
Commissioner Max Bauer.
We passed our motion April 3rd. So
Right.
I'm assuming that we started May 1st.
Right.
It's just an assumption.
Well, I'm not talking about commission, I'm talking about board.
I know. I would anticipate that we would at least give them some kind of notice, because people sometimes just don't do it. They procrastinate.
No.
I did.
And we have to,
So how about June 1st?
Start July 1.
Yeah, I have no problem with making it July 1. That's-
All right.
That's the center of our
Gives
fiscal
everybody
year.
a chance.
motion maker
Everybody
and second
knows.
agree with July 1? Okay. And that would give them notice, because if they've been saving it for the last 4 or 5 months, they can just get it submitted.
Well, some people are procrastinators and some are not, so.
Okay.
But I'm just adding, if we want to add the fact that if they don't submit it in that timely fashion, that they're waiving the right to be able to collect that fee.
I think that's just a given.
I think that's a given.
Okay, I don't care.
If you don't submit the bill within 30 days,
All right.
it's not owed.
You know, I just have a touch of an issue with that, but
You know,
Because you're a
if you're
procrastinator?
responsible,
I'm gonna
if
tell
you're
you.
responsible enough to sit on the committee, you're responsible
Yeah.
enough to submit your per diem
I'm
request.
just concerned about somebody that breaks their shoulder and is in the hospital and in rehab and not around for 45 days or 8 weeks.
We're not talking.
And listen, he's the model child, okay, right over here. And the last thing he needs to do is try to write out or figure out his per diem sheet in a hospital.
I guarantee you, it would be within 30 days.
I just hope there would be some level of discretion if
There's
a person comes
there's a
forward.
million what-ifs that we can have a discussion about, but the fact is, the policy should be that if the county board has to submit their per diems within 30 days, all people that are collecting per diems from Grand Traverse County should also submit theirs.
You know, we
within
need a
30
big
days.
C for consistency on our
Yes,
foreheads
right.
here.
All right, Commissioner Thomas.
Well, one of the problems is if the audit committee gets some that goes back 3 months, and that's all it is. It's too hard to keep track of.
Yeah.
It's too hard for me to look at and say, well, did he turn these back, they're here from September, did he already turn them in once?
All right,
Dean checks that.
All right.
I don't think he's got time to check them all.
Oh, he does.
I'll drop
Got
my
other
tone.
things to do.
I'll drop my note of sympathy. All right.
All right.
Any other discussion? All right, so the motion on the floor is to clarify with all departments that
Yes.
collect per diem from Grand Traverse County, boards and commissions, that they must submit it in a monthly basis, and it would
This
be
is-
effective July 1st.
Sounds good.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Passes.
I just want to warn you guys, that means I'm going to be working for free because I just can't seem to get this done.
Doc, you could always give it to one of your secretaries.
I could, couldn't I? Yeah, I've got one. Or my CPA, right?
Or your CPA.
Yeah.
All right.
And they could bill you for it.
Yeah. I end up owing them money.
It'll cost you money.
Okay, we have, under,
like to-
that concludes unfinished business, unless you have
I
something.
just had one more thing that I wanted to add to this. The per diem policy is going to be back on your agenda next week because they want to add a paragraph to rescind previous policies. Apparently, that wasn't very clear. And I think our county clerk would like that added.
Okay.
Well, yes, the resolution didn't say to rescind the previous one. We don't want people to be confused, so
Okay.
it'll just be a housekeeping, you'll rescind it.
We
and
can
they'll
do
just
that.
amend that resolution. We're not going to have a whole new
We can do that.
Okay, thank you very much for that note. Okay, that concludes item 10. 11 is new business. There is none listed. We will move on to second public comment. Any members of the public wish to speak at this time?
You'll have to line up.
Seeing none, we will close second public comment. We have committee reports. Anybody want to give a report? Commissioner Lathrop.
Peninsula Township, I talked about stormwater. The second issue that they're struggling with out there is all of the public events, like races and bicycle races and things like that, that affect the peninsula. They're having a hard time managing that because of parking on both sides of the road and roads being closed down while races go on and farmers can't get their tractors to their fields. Just FYI, that's a struggle out there, and they're trying to find out answers for it.
All right. Commissioner Thomas?
Yeah, this is a little off subject, but last Saturday it was, I went over to the Duck Lake Dam just to check to see if I could start putting boards in. And the lake is higher than I've ever seen it, and the river is same, it's just full. And one of the things the biggest thing I noticed is that the dam had quite a log jam built up right in front of it. So, over the years, I've cleaned it out a few times, but my back won't allow that anymore, but at any rate, over the years, we've had guys from the DPW or wherever go over and work on it. I called Kevin, and Monday morning, I called Monday, and he went over Monday afternoon, and he cleaned the whole log jam out.
Cool.
Wow.
The dam looked good Monday night.
Thank
so
you. Thank you.
I wanted to make sure everybody knew that Kevin really did a good job.
Okay, great. And, Commissioner Lemko?
Yeah, I got a email from the chairman of the Conservation District that the new executive director will be Marcia Barbara Clark for the Conservation District. So she used to be the head of the Girl Scout office here. And so I think that's going to be a good selection, and looking forward to working with her.
All right. Anyone else? Commissioner Maxwell?
I just want to speak, Commissioner Thomas's comments about Duck Lake being so high. I thought people might be interested in knowing, we have basically no beach out at North Twin Lake. The picnic table's underwater.
Oh, boy.
I mean, it's just, yeah.
They're all way up.
Yeah.
It's just, there's nothing. I don't know whether that's going to change, but
Anyone else?
And out our way, all the lakes are all the lakes are full.
Everywhere. All the lakes are filled.
Everywhere.
And if you have an opinion on e-cigarettes, tomorrow is your opportunity, 6 o'clock in this chamber.
Okay.
Parks and Rec is going to be talking about e-cigarettes at Civic Center.
Are those the ones that look like cigarettes and they just
They
aren't?
look like cigarettes, they have some kind of liquid in them.
And they
with-
vaporize.
They vaporize, but they do have nicotine in them.
Oh, they do?
Oh, yeah.
All right, okay.
And they're expensive.
I wouldn't know.
All I know is somebody told me they paid over $35 for one.
Jeez.
You're not finding them on the grounds, are you?
No, it's
No.
just,
People just get the impression smoking's allowed because they can't tell the difference, right?
well, that's not necessarily it either. One of the Parks Commissioners is a parent and feels very strongly that he doesn't want his
Bad influence.
child to be influenced by that. And so there will be, I'm sure, a lively discussion.
All right.
I will, however, will be in Canada at the Canadian Nationals, Masters
Congratulations.
Swimming. Well, don't congratulate me, I'm not going to
Bring
win
back the
anything. Greg, last time he won 7 out of 8 events. He was a national champion.
Wow.
But it won't be me, I'm sure.
I will say that those e-cigarettes are allowing people to be able to quit smoking, and that's a plus. And we got to figure out how to encourage it, to be able to get them to quit smoking. That's a health issue.
That's what my
Okay.
doctor keeps saying.
Any other commissioner committee reports? Okay, moving on to notices and announcements. Commissioner Wheelock.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I was very, very late tonight, leaving
Thank you.
my office, so I did not get opportunity. I will see that tomorrow, hopefully tomorrow, I can get you sent. I was contacted last week by Paul Johnson from the DPW. You may or may not remember, and I believe it was in 2009, the turbine was removed from the Boardman Dam, and a cover was constructed to put over the top of it. I bid the cover. At the time, I did not receive 2/3 of the board's approval to do that job. Another company did locally. There is a concern that there may be a failure in the cover or its attachment point, and URS has been there and is drafting a possible repair to that. And I just give you notice tonight, and I will provide you a documentation within the next couple days of my proposal to make those necessary repairs. But I did not do the job originally, and I will provide you the documentation to that too. But I just want you to know that I will be providing them with a proposal to fix it. I'm not sure that the design that URS sent, as far as I'm concerned, meets the need of the project.
Any other notices and announcements?
Is there a way we can do a blanket thing for that? There's no way.
No.
Case by case.
Or just make it a whole lot easier.
But I will say that Sonny knows his business probably better than
Oh, yeah.
anybody in the county. I mean,
Why don't you take the dam out,
If
like a
it-
new bridge on it?
if he can't fix it, it can't be fixed.
All right, any other notices? The only notice I have is who called who? Did you call Rennie, or did Rennie call Dave about what you were wearing tonight?
Gray suits on, I wouldn't say they're the same, though.
I'm usually not
Well,
saying.
what about Dan and I? We got the memo, we're in purple.
I got the gray and white, though.
But we did call each other.
We're men in gray.
It was just something I noticed,
That's good.
under notices.
Now, we had to go see the appellate judges today, so we had to
You're
dress up.
observant.
Okay,
We did have a good presentation from the appellate judges. We appreciate them being in Traverse City. It's nice that they will travel around instead of people having to go to them. So we appreciate them. They're going to be hearing cases here tomorrow. So,
25 of them.
yeah.
all right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
before this group gets out of hand, I'd like to make a motion we adjourn.
Sounds good to me,
We
Sonny.
have no closed session, we have a motion
Yes,
for
yes.
adjournment. Commissioner
Wait a
We do
Wheelock.
have a closed session.
We have a closed session?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Oh,
Oh, we
no.
have a closed session.
Oh, well, if you
Okay.
don't want to go into closed session.
No, that's all right. Okay.
We do have a closed
We
session?
were going to have a closed session.
No, that's fine.
Discuss,
Let's
do something related
I
to
make a
negotiation
motion
strategy.
to
I
go into-
withdraw the motion.
What is the closed session?
Yeah, I think we should
Move
go
to
to,
close, go into closed session for
Support.
discussion of a,
related to negotiation strategy.
yeah,
Okay.
What
negotiation
is the
strategy.
bargaining contract, Dave, that's pending?
I sure did.
Yes.
What is the contract?
It's the Teamsters contract.
Okay, and they're up for
Teamsters
discussion
And here comes
currently?
Jen.
They're up for
She
discussion
timed it
currently,
just
though?
right.
What was that question about?
Going into negotiations.
I was
with them.
asking which contract,
What
and are they
kind of role?
currently up for negotiation?
Yeah, so we have to specify that in the closed session. or
That's, I
minute-
wanted to make
minutes.
sure we specified that, so Bonnie gets the right terminology in there.
Okay.
So who made that motion?
I did.
All right, moved by Lemkool, seconded by Thomas, to go into closed session regarding the matter as discussed by the administrator.
Roll call.
Roll call vote.
Lemkool,
Yep.
Wheelock,
Yes, ma'am.
Thomas,
Yep.
Rennie,
Yes.
Lathrop,
Yeah.
Max Bauer,
Yes.
Inman.
Yes. Are we going to come back with some type of decision?
No.
All right, so just for the members of the public here and the ones watching, this is going to be an informational session on our behalf. We will not be coming back with any decisions, and we'll come back and adjourn.
It'll be short.
I like short.
I'm not so sure it'll be sweet, but it'll be short.
Thanks, Bob. Good suggestion.